Could you dance with me? My ex is watching. The ballroom shimmered under 1,000 crystal lights, but Emma couldn't see any of it. All she could see was him, her ex-boyfriend Marcus, standing across the room with his arm draped possessively around a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Emma's chest tightened as their eyes met for just a fraction of a second, and she watched his lips curl into that familiar, condescending smirk. The same smirk that had crushed her spirit for 2 years. The same smirk that said she would never be enough. Her hands trembled as she gripped her champagne glass, feeling smaller and smaller in her borrowed bridesmaid dress, wishing she could disappear into the ornate wallpaper. That's when she noticed him, a man standing near the bar, tall and impossibly handsome in a midnight blue suit, watching her with eyes that seemed to understand everything she was feeling without her having to say a word. If you're already hooked and want to see where this story goes, please hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Pulse for more heartfelt stories that will touch your soul. Your support means everything to us. Emma had never been good at being brave. Throughout her life, she'd been the quiet one, the one who stood in the shadows while others shinned. Even now, as a bridesmaid at her college roommate's wedding, she felt like an afterthought, someone filling space in the carefully choreographed photos. She'd almost declined the invitation when she found out Marcus would be there. Marcus, who had told her she was too plain, too boring, too forgettable to ever really matter to anyone. But Sarah had begged, and Emma couldn't say no to her best friend, so here she was, trying to survive an evening that felt like walking through broken glass barefoot. The moment she'd walked into the reception, she'd felt Marcus's eyes on her. He'd made a point of introducing his new girlfriend loudly enough for Emma to hear, emphasizing words like successful and confident and going places, so everything Emma supposedly wasn't. Each word had landed like a stone in her stomach, confirming every insecurity he'd planted in her during their relationship. She'd spent the last hour hiding behind flower arrangements and making awkward small talk with distant relatives, counting down the minutes until she could leave without seeming rude. But now Marcus was walking toward the dance floor with his girlfriend, and Emma knew with absolute certainty that he was doing it to perform for her, to show her what she'd lost, to prove that leaving her was the best decision he'd ever made. The panic rose in her throat like a wave, and before she could think about what she was doing, before her rational mind could stop her desperate heart, Emma found herself crossing the ballroom floor toward the stranger at the bar. He was even more striking up close, sharp jawline, dark hair with just a hint of grey at the temples, and eyes the color of smoke that seemed to see right through every wall she'd ever built around herself. When she reached him, the words tumbled out of her mouth in a breathless whisper that barely qualified as speaking. Could you dance with me? My ex is watching. She expected him to laugh or politely decline or look at her like she was insane. Instead, he set down his drink with deliberate grace, and the smallest smile touched the corner of his lips, not mocking, but gentle, almost protective. I thought you never ask, he said in a voice like warm honey, and extended his hand. The moment Emma's fingers touched his, everything changed. He led her onto the dance floor with the kind of confidence that didn't need to announce itself, pulling her close enough that she could smell his cologne, as something expensive and understated, cedar and smoke. His hand settled on the small of her back with perfect pressure, not presumptuous but secure, and when they began to move, Emma realized with surprise that he was an exceptional dancer. Not the showy kind that demanded attention, but the kind who made his partner look graceful, who anticipated every step and guided her through the movements as though they'd been dancing together for years. Thank you, Emma whispered, acutely aware that Marcus was watching them now. His conversation with his girlfriend forgotten. For what? The stranger asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his tone. For saving me. I know this is probably weird and I'm sorry for dragging you into my mess. You're not a mess, he interrupted gently, and the certainty in his voice made her look up at him. Their eyes met, and Emma felt something shift in her chest. like a door she'd kept locked for years suddenly swinging open. And you don't need saving. You just needed a partner for one dance. They moved together in silence for a moment, and Emma found herself relaxing into his arms in a way she'd never relaxed with Marcus, who had always criticized her dancing, her posture, her everything. This man held her like she was something precious but not fragile, something valuable but not breakable. "I'm Emma, by the way," she said, realizing they'd skipped all the normal introductions. "I know," he replied, and when her eyes widened in confusion, he added, "I'm Alexander Chen. I believe I have the pleasure of being your boss." Emma's feet stopped moving entirely. Alexander Chen, CEO of Chen Digital Solutions, the company where she'd worked in the marketing department for the past 8 months. The CEO she'd only ever seen in company-wide emails and from a distance during the quarterly meetings. The man whose strategies she admired, whose leadership style she'd studied, whose occasional feedback on her campaign proposals had meant more to her than any praise she'd ever received. Heat flooded her cheeks as she realized she'd just begged her CEO to pity dance with her at a wedding. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't recognize you, I shouldn't have." The words tumbled out in a mortified rush, but Alexander's hand tightened gently on hers, keeping her from pulling away. "Don't apologize," he said, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I've been wanting to meet you properly for months, Emma. Your work on the Riverside campaign was brilliant. The way you connected emotional storytelling with data-driven strategy showed a level of insight that most people take years to develop. I've been watching your career." Emma felt dizzy, and not from the dancing. "You know my work. I make it a point to know the people in my company who have real talent," Alexander said, and they began moving again, slower now, as though neither of them wanted the song to end. "People who see possibilities where others see obstacles. People who are braver than they give themselves credit for." Emma glanced over at Marcus, who was staring at them with an expression she'd never seen before, something that looked almost like regret mixed with confusion. His girlfriend was tugging at his sleeve, clearly annoyed by his distraction. For a moment, Emma waited for the familiar sting of satisfaction, the vindication she'd imagined feeling if Marcus ever saw her with someone better. But when it came, there was nothing. No triumph, no pain, no connection at all. Marcus had become irrelevant, a closed chapter, a lesson learned. "He told me I would never be special," Emma said softly, surprised by her own honesty. "That I'd always be ordinary." Alexander's expression darkened for just a moment, protective and fierce, before softening again. "Then he never really knew you at all. Anyone who makes you feel small isn't seeing you clearly, they're just revealing their own limitations." The song was ending, transitioning into something slower and more intimate, but Alexander didn't let go of her hand. Instead, he leaned down slightly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Emma, I came to this wedding specifically because I saw your name on the RSVP list for Sarah's wedding. We have mutual connections, and when I realized you'd be here, I thought it might be a chance to finally talk to you outside the office walls. I've wanted to ask you something for weeks now." Emma's heart was thundering so loud she was certain everyone in the ballroom could hear it. "What?" "There's a gala next month at the Digital Innovation Awards. I need to bring someone who understands the industry, who can navigate those conversations with intelligence and grace. I'd like that person to be you. Not as my employee, but as my partner for the evening, and maybe, if you're willing, for more evenings after that." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Alexander Chen, her CEO, the man she'd admired from afar, was asking her out. Not out of pity or obligation, but because he saw something in her that Marcus had been too blind to recognize. Because he valued her mind, her work, her presence. "I don't understand," Emma whispered. "Why me?" "Because when I read your campaign proposals, I see someone who believes in connection, in kindness, in the power of stories to change hearts. Because in meetings, you're the one who asks the questions that challenge us to be better. Because right now, standing here with you, I feel more myself than I have in years." Alexander's thumb traced a gentle circle on her hand. "But mostly because when you walked up to me tonight, terrified and brave all at once, asking a stranger for help. You reminded me that the most extraordinary things often start with the smallest acts of courage. Emma thought about all the times she'd made herself smaller to fit into Marcus's world. All the times she'd apologized for taking up space, for having opinions, for wanting more. She thought about the years she'd spent believing she was forgettable, ordinary, not quite enough. And then she looked into Alexander's eyes and saw herself reflected there, not as she'd been told she was, but as she actually was. Capable, talented, worthy. Yes, she said, and the word felt like freedom. I'd love to go with you. Alexander's smile transformed his entire face, and as he pulled her close for another dance, Emma realized that Marcus was no longer watching them. He'd turned away, back to his own life, his own choices, completely irrelevant to her story now. And that was exactly as it should be. Before we wrap up this beautiful story, if you've felt inspired or touched by Emma's journey, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever found courage in an unexpected moment? Your stories and support help us continue bringing you content that celebrates kindness and human connection. As the night went on, Emma and Alexander talked for hours, discovering shared passions for classic films and terrible puns and coffee that was probably too strong to be healthy. They debated marketing strategies and laughed about office quirks and shared the quiet vulnerabilities that people usually keep hidden behind professional masks. And when the wedding finally ended and Alexander walked Emma to her car, he didn't try to kiss her or rush anything forward. He simply held her hand, thanked her for the best evening he'd had in years, and promised to call her tomorrow. Driving home under a sky full of stars, Emma realized that she'd spent so long looking for validation from someone who could never give it that she'd almost missed the truth. She didn't need Marcus to see her worth for it to exist. She didn't need anyone to make her special because she'd been special all along, carrying her value inside herself like a light waiting to be recognized. Alexander hadn't saved her tonight, or he'd simply been brave enough to approach the woman he admired and honest enough to tell her what he saw. The saving, the courage, the choice to walk across that ballroom floor and ask for what she needed, that had been all Emma. Sometimes the person you're meant to find is hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment when you're finally ready to be seen. Sometimes courage looks like asking a stranger to dance. And sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with fireworks and grand gestures, but with two people recognizing in each other the kind of goodness they want to build a life around: a kindness, respect, and the quiet certainty that together, they can create something extraordinary.